Welcome into Running for Coverage. I'm Cole Pepper, and today we look back on the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials, a little bit on the Donna Marathon weekend, and look ahead to the Gate River Run as Keith Brantly joins me once again. Keith has, of course, been on the show several times and will be my broadcast partner for the Gate River Run on Channel 4 coming up on March the 2nd. We'll look ahead to what we expect in terms of the field and some tips for those of you who are going through your final preparation in the final month before the 15K National Championship. It's all coming up straight ahead right here on Running for Coverage. And it is my pleasure once again, as always, to welcome in Keith Brantly, 1996 U.S. Olympian, and also will be appearing once again along with me on the broadcast of the Gate River Run on Channel 4 this year. We'll get to the River Run here in just a bit, but Keith was down in Orlando at the U.S. Olympic Trials as an ambassador for USA Track and Field. Before we get into the race itself, give me your experience down there, and when you go to these major events like an Olympic trials, what's the experience like for somebody who competed in them several times?
Well, and Cole, thanks for having me back. I really do appreciate it. And this show is just fantastic. It's a great service to the running community. So I really appreciate it. This was a very unique trials and a very unique event for me because one, obviously being held in Florida. The team that was tapped to put it on, John Hughes and Betsy Hughes out of the Track Shack in Orlando. I've known John since I was 15 years old. He gave me my first pair of track spikes. So for both of us, this was something that we have had our eyes on for 40 years. And to have the major marathon for Americans in the United States running in Orlando, which is a fantastic thing. They pulled it off flawlessly. They made it look like they had been doing this for 50 years, which they have, but this is a unique event. And so, for me, it was great seeing some old friends, great seeing new talent coming into the sport. You look at Connor Mance and Clayton Young, coached by my former rival, Ed Isone. And, it brought back a lot of great memories.
For local running fans to have seen both Clayton Young and Emily Sisson qualify for the U.S. Olympic team, former Gate River Run winners, Emily Sisson the last three, Clayton Young having won in 2021. We've got some local connection as far as that's concerned. You mentioned that it's a different thing. You can put on races, but to put on a U.S. Olympic marathon trials is a different creature. How so? In what ways is it different? Just the focus and the attention that is on it that raises the stakes a little bit?
Yeah, there's much more of a process orientation to this. It is, when you take the recreational piece out of this, there's a lot more at stake, obviously. The 400 plus athletes that qualified both on the men's and women's side, few of them are going to make the team going in, right? We know that. But that doesn't mean that those that didn't make the team this time aren't looking forward to the next 4 years or the next 8 years, or in my case, the next 12 years. So I think it is an event that is important to everyone that's competing. It is obviously there are some important stakeholders like Go Sports in Orlando, which was really the catalyst for getting the bid. The Track Shack, of course, and then of course USATF, has their administrative piece to do that. So it's a very different event. There's obviously a tremendous amount of security that was surrounding the event, and it went off flawlessly. It just went off perfectly.
Yeah, the other thing that strikes me here is that, as you mentioned, you've got 400 plus runners. Maybe 50 of them have a real chance of finishing in the top three total between the two races. Maybe that number may be high. And one of the big focuses of this year's race was going to be the weather and the impact that it could have. They moved up the start from noon to 10, which I think was a very good idea. I understand the television component of this, where they wanted to have it on NBC. They wind up putting it live on Peacock, so it streams. That's how we watched it here at the house. And then they replayed it on NBC at noon. And, the heat being a factor, I wondered how much you talk about Orlando and the impact of having that. There's a certain amount of time before the games that you want an Olympic trials marathon to run. You don't want it to be too close to the games because recovery could be an issue for an athlete who qualifies for the team. But you also don't want to be so far away that the training they've had for the trials falls off, and they have to have a whole new buildup, where they can't just sort of take a little break and then build up again. Did you think the timing of the trials, time of year, time of day, is something that will wind up helping the U.S. Olympic qualifiers once the marathon rolls around in Paris?
I think the timing it's true. It's traditionally we've had them in January and February. I think having them a little bit further apart might be helpful. You run into the same risk you would have if you had them 3 months apart. People are going to detrain a little bit, or they're going to come out of the trials possibly with a little bit of an injury. So, there's risk on both sides. If you have it too far apart, you may have different players that are not going to be relevant in the games for one reason or another. I think that this is about as fair. It is a very flawed process that we have, but by the same token, I think it's the fairest process. I think to select our team based on times or an amalgamation of performances in majors, I think that tends to it tends to give deference to the athletes that have great sponsors, that are already really running well. I don't know if the Fiona O'Keeffe's of the world would have thrived in that situation.
Right. Well, she didn't have a marathon to fall
She
back
didn't
on,
have a
so
marathon,
she qualified at the halftime.
Right, exactly. So if we were looking at it from that perspective, she would have had a struggle to be selected for the team. And that's the way they do it in Great Britain, Australia. For the most part, many of these countries will look at performances over time. They'll look at their fitness. They may even actually have to do some sort of time trial that is agreed upon. I think ours is the fairest way to do it.
All right. So what do you think? It's a long way off. We can revisit this as the games approach, but what are your thoughts on the five, maybe six qualifiers that we saw get in? Leonard Career is waiting to get the official word on
Mhm.
whether he'll get in. But what are the chances of medaling from any of those six athletes?
Well, I think on the women's side, I definitely think that Emily Sisson has the experience. She has, the depth of experience that I think is going to help her. Is she, running as the way she's run at Chicago, the way that she competes will put her in the hunt, I think, for certainly top 10, potentially top five. It's very difficult to kind of predict where those three are going to land. Those three places are going to land. O'Keeffe and Dakota, I think that they're going to have to gain a tremendous amount of experience in a very, very short period of time. On the men's side, I think Clayton and Connor, I think that they are well heeled enough and experienced enough. Clayton especially, to be able to make an impact. Career, again, his age is and the length of time he's been competing the Olympic Games will not be a big deal for him if he does get chosen.
It's you would think that the women probably stand the better chance of sneaking in there for a medal than the men, but things in a marathon, we know how things
It's the
go.
Olympics. Yeah, you
We saw
never.
Kara D'Amato and Galen Rupp have terrible days at the office,
Yep.
and both had to pull out. And obviously Galen's been dealing with a lot of injuries over the last
Mhm.
several years, but things on any given day. Then again,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
women aren't chasing Elliot Kipchoge or some of his friends, so it's maybe a little
No,
easier task there.
no, but I think that there's the women's with the new world record being in the 211 range. I think that the women's the depth of women's distance running, and if you look back 40 years when Joni and team ran the first Olympic Games, the depth was good, but it's nothing like it is today. So I think that you're going to see a very competitive race in the women's side, and I think probably as competitive as the men's race.
All right. So on the local angle, we had two local runners run, one on the women's side, one on the men's, as we talked about here on the podcast. Kelsey Pontius running her second U.S. Olympic marathon trials, and Sam Sultanoff running his first. You know both well. You competed against Sam's mother
Mm-hmm.
or competed alongside in the
Mm-hmm.
Olympics, and have known his folks for quite a while. And you know Kelsey well. Neither finished the race. Both had to pull out. Kelsey around the 20-mile mark, and Sam around the 9-mile mark. You have been through it where you didn't have the day you wanted to at the Olympic trials. What do you tell runners like that?
Well, I think it is, politics are local, right? And so are injuries and so are problems. So, for me to, kind of dissect what was going on in Sim and Kelsey's head is going to be challenging. I did speak to Kelsey right after the race, and she apparently did have some real problems with her feet. She had, I had a pair of shoes that just didn't function well for her, and having had that happen to me, it is very difficult to finish. I'm really surprised she got as far as she did, actually, with the problem she was having. I think she will recycle, and I'm sure she's already planning the next 4 to 8 years, much as I did when I didn't make the team. In 84, 88, 92. So, I think that's important. Sim was a little bit different in that, this was his first trials. I don't know if he obviously didn't have any like injury problems because he jumped in and ran the Donna Marathon the next day. Or at least I think that was his plan, was to run the marathon, and then somehow downgraded halfway through to the half. Ended up winning the half, but I would have to ask Sim, and I think it'd be a good question for him. Why? What was the situation? Why did he drop out at 9 miles? This is the Olympic trials. If it's your first one, you really do need to, unless you've got just a major problem, you want to finish it. And I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I just got a note from him saying that he and his coach are going to go back and take a look at some things. Thought maybe he might have overtrained potentially for it, but we'll keep an eye on both of them. Sem says he's planning on running the Gate River Run. I don't know if Kelsey's made that determination yet. We'll see how that goes, which transitions us into the biggest race in Jacksonville, coming off the Donna weekend, which is always a big weekend, but the Gate River Run. Looking forward to that one once again. It is because it does fall in a U.S. Olympic trials year. That always makes for a very interesting and surprising sometimes winner, because the field can be um, can be missing some of the top runners, and sometimes you get people who maybe just fell short of the Olympic trials and are maybe changing their focus from a distance standpoint, or just trying to get in a good competitive longer run like a 15K. These Olympic qualifying years are always a little different to handle.
Yeah. Well, and you got to think about this too. I mean, when I missed the team in '88, I ran the I ran the 5 and the 10,000 meters in 88 and was fourth in the 5,000. And I was so disappointed in my performances that later that fall, after the games had rolled out and I had to watch them on television, it filled me full of resolve. And I trained for 10 weeks at 100 miles a week and ended up running the Gasparilla Distance Classic in 89, early part of 89 in February, and ended up running one of the fastest times of the world that year for 15K. And I think that you will have runners that'll come in from River Run, having either had a failure of one sort at the trials, didn't run the way they wanted to, or ended up with a little bit of, like in Kelsey's case, some foot issues, but have healed up. They've got all this fitness, they've got a tremendous amount of fitness. So you might have somebody come in there that is just pissed off and at themselves, at the way things went, and just open it up at River Run and run a fantastic time.
It's going to be very interesting. The course is the same as it was last year. However, there is a team component that's been reintroduced
Mm-hmm.
this year. That won't necessarily impact the elite runners, but even some of the faster local qualifiers could be running for a team. So I wonder what kind of an impact that might have on some of first Coast Cup competition or something like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you go in and you're part of a team, your issues and your doubts during the race dissolve very, very quickly when you know that you have 4 or 5 other people depending on you and your performance. And you quickly forget about the pain you're going through, and when you think about, okay, I've got to support this team, and my performance counts. It matters. When I look back at the trials, it's a very stressful situation. Some of the athletes that are coming back in, the elites, maybe not on one of these teams, but in the end, this is kind of a decompression and allows them to race. Same thing with the recreational runners and the runners that are on some of these teams. They're jumping onto this team. It is, kind of a fun day for them, but that added team component is a lot of fun. It really is.
I'm very interested to see if Emily Sisson comes back off the trials and how and if she would run this as part of her kind of taper or de-taper. I don't know what it might look like at that point, to try to win a fourth straight Gate River run. That obviously I would root for that here to just to have that storyline.
I would
Hillary
too.
Borer, who won last year, I imagine will come back and try to defend his title. We'll find out who all lines up, probably closer to race day than usual because of the
Right.
trials. But those would be two big storylines for sure to see how the defending champs might perform.
Absolutely, and in Emily's case, I'd love to see her, toe the line. I think the odds are against her doing it, just because at post marathon, there's a lot of things that happen. You can, be harboring a stress fracture, things like that, and you don't want to. Your body's healing after a marathon, and you want to give it good time to heal. It wouldn't surprise me if she came out, feeling pretty good and did jump into River Run, but she finished second, and she got beaten by somebody who is not a marathoner. At least they weren't before they towed the line. And so she's got to reconcile how she could have won that race. And so I'd be surprised if she did run.
If it was 26.4, she might have caught her. Emily Sisson was coming at the end,
She
and
was flying. She
she was.
was.
I haven't looked at her last mile splits, but I have a feeling they would have been among her fastest miles because she was coming after it. But again, as you mentioned, her most important thing is to be ready for Paris. So when you were running at your peak, running marathons and Olympic trials and so forth, what did the first month or two after the Olympic trials look like for you?
Oh, it was ugly, Cole, because we ran on a course that was the antithesis of Orlando. In Charlotte, it was just one mountain after another. It was also 28 degrees, and I think that cold weather has adds as much of a difficult component as running in heat. It is hard to stay warm, especially when you're getting dehydrated, and it can bring all sorts of problems into the mix. It took me a month before I could walk normally after the trials. That was an extreme case, but this course was, just one hill after another. And, it's not the uphills that hurt you, it's the downhills. And when you're running 30, 440 pace going down some of these hills at the end of a marathon, your legs take a beating. So it took me a good month before I could actually walk normally. I had to take almost 2 weeks completely off. I don't think that the athletes that ran at in Orlando are going to have that same sort of problem. I think the super shoes actually helped that quite a bit. I'll give you an example. Josh Itzewicz, he finished eighth, runs for Zap, Florida Gator, good kid. You talk about the distance. If it had been a 27-mile race, he would have been in the top five. He was coming on fast as well. He's the type of kid that he can bounce back very quickly. Got a smooth stride, and I think he could be a contender for top five at River Run if he decides to run. You're going to get guys there. It'll take them a good 2 weeks before they can really assess where they are. If they gave a real honest effort at the trials. If they just cruised in, Galen finished, I believe, 16th, I think it was. I think the fight for him is it might be done. But there are a lot of other guys that didn't have great days, expected more. I wouldn't be a bit surprised maybe even see Zach Panning.
Yeah, who led for quite a bit of the race and then just didn't have
But just
have the finish.
a brilliant race. I mean, here's a guy who he had really, two things that he had to accomplish. He had to, run, 208, and he had to finish in the top three. And that's a lot of weight to carry for a race like that.
He did a
And
lot of the work for that lead pack for
listen,
most of the first 15, 16 miles.
if you can show me a major marathon, and I would consider the trials a major marathon, if you can show me a major marathon where the winner was leading at 10 miles, I'll give you $100.
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often. All right, let's transition into talking about what people who are running the Gate River Run should be thinking about here inside a month to go before the gate. Is there anything that a local runner, anywhere from a highly competitive down to somebody who is doing more than just a social run, is there anything they can do to help their preparation for the river run as we sit right now?
Yeah. I'll just put this out there. Whatever you don't go out the night before with your buddies. At a bar and take a challenge and do a drinking game and say you're going to run the river run the next day. That is not what we want to see out there. I don't care what kind of fitness you're in. Probably not a good idea. If we're in the last month, the bottom line is that there's still some improvement that can occur, right? You want to make sure though that last week that you're tapering a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 days out, that you're cutting back on your running. You can get through this race by running 3 days a week. I promise you can. Those 3 days a week will have to be something that, by now you should be up to the 8 or 9 mile range. If you're going in just to finish this, you can run and walk it. You can, do the 3 minutes on of running and 2 minutes off of walking, things like that. You can get through this. What I do caution is that we don't want to get in a situation where we are, pushing ourselves day after day after day, and you're not taking any days off. Your body improves through recovery. and it obviously improves through the hard training. That's easy. Okay. Anybody can go out and train really hard. And it takes a genius to know how much to rest. And most people get that wrong. They don't quite understand that their body really needs to have that recovery in order to improve. So I always tell people, if you're a serious runner, recreation, serious local runner, and let's say you want to try to break, let's say, an hour and a half for a river run, you need to maybe jump in Ortega and get a good idea of what kind of pacing you can do maybe a 5K time trial, and get an idea of what kind of pacing that gives you. And then you can structure your race around that.
Such a great point because of the distance and because it's an uncommon distance. You don't find many 15Ks anymore.
Mm.
Most folks don't really know what their race pace feels like. They might default to a half marathon race pace potentially, or try to, split the difference between a half and
Mhm.
10K. But your body can feel what your pace needs to be if you've run it often enough. But you're running a 15K, that it's just so unusual, that feeling that pace might be tricky. So you almost have to use a different race. It sounds like, um, not worry about place or results so much as, can I keep this pace? Can I teach myself what the pace needs to be? So when I'm out there during the Gate River Run, 7 miles in, I know what it should feel like.
Yep. I always default to the what Frank Shorter told me when I ran my first marathon. He says, go out in the first mile and kind of assess, look down at the ground, see how fast you're covering the ground, look at the telephone poles, see how fast you're going by the telephone poles, and then imagine yourself finishing the marathon that fast, and then slow down because you'll never finish that fast. And it's true. I mean, the excitement, the adrenaline's pumping in the beginning, is a drug that makes people go crazy, and they become really unrealistic in their pacing. And I think it's so important for folks to realize that, the hard work you've been doing in training isn't for naught if by going out a little slower, starting out a little bit slower and making sure that you're running within yourself. But definitely, if you can even if you can't find a 5K race, go out and do a 5K time trial, and use that time as kind of a baseline for what you can do. You're going to have to add some time, and let's say you're a 10-minute miler, and you run let's say a 5K in 33 minutes or so. Realize that you're going to have to add some time to each mile. You might have to add a full minute to each mile as you go. But it's better to start off a little slower and work into it rather than jump out there and go too fast.
Negative splits until the bottom of the green monster, and then whatever you can do to get over it, right?
Well, and we've said this before, Cole. I mean, don't build your entire mindset and race plan around that bridge. It's a half mile up, and out of 15 kilometers, that's a fairly small amount of time to suffer, and you will suffer. But there are plenty of people that are suffering with you, and it is really a rite of passage for anyone who has run the river run, is to get over that bridge, feeling pretty strong.
Do you have any advice for first timers hitting the bridge?
My best advice for them is to, get up that first ramp all the way to when you start onto the bridge itself, and then slow down, walk a little bit, maybe for 30 seconds, just so that you can enjoy, climbing that bridge. The view is obviously spectacular. I know you're trying to get over it, but in the end, don't run with your head down. Keep your eyes up. It's amazing how when you put your head down, you cut your peripheral vision by about 40%. And it's so important to keep your head up and be looking up that bridge. And it sounds kind of the opposite of what you want to do. But if you see your goal, you will be your goal. And I say this because I used to do this all the time. I used to look down at the ground and kind of, you become insular, you disassociate from your job, and your job is to get to the top of that hill. Look up at the top of that hill, see where you've got to go, and you'll get there. But if you constantly have your head down, it's just really basically just waiting for, your time to go by, and it's not going to help you at all.
It's always one of the highlights of the race to see who can manage the green monster and who can come down off it. Of course, we had some that needed medical attention last year. Weather is always plays a big factor. So as we get closer, we'll have a better idea of how hot, cold, rainy, windy, clear, overcast, whatever it might be, to see if somebody can put up a big number. Keith, thanks so much. For those who are going to be running the River Run, you should be able to watch a replay of our coverage on news4jax.com. But always looking forward to calling the race with you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Cole.
That'll do it for Running for Coverage. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can check us out on our webpage, which is runningforcoverage.com. And on all those places, you can find ways to sign up for our nearly weekly email newsletter that has discount codes for races and opportunities to save money on gas and other things, plus the very latest on what's happening in our running community in Northeast Florida. So for Keith Brantly, I'm Cole Pepper. Thanks so much for joining us this week right here on Running for Coverage.